start the thing. There we go. All right, Miguel, we'll let you kick us off.
All right, guys, good afternoon, good evening. For the record, we are recording this session. It will be on YouTube afterwards. Thank you for joining. We're very happy to have you join this, and we'll like to do this on a regular basis. Today, we're going to talk about our strategic plan for 2022 to 2025 or thereabouts, and we'll talk about the timing in a second. Go ahead on the next slide, Chris. So the NBOT creates the strategic plan for the organization. The job of the board is to create a roadmap of where we want to go. And the CEO and his staff's job is to figure out how to do that and create some metrics. This is a very critical process for us. And let me go a little bit, if you guys give me Poetic license, go a little bit in the past. We never had a consistent strategy in the past couple of years. So when SHPE was 300 members, 1,000 members, 2,000 members, 3,000 members, we had strategies that changed virtually every 2 years. And the good thing was that there was always new energy to do things. The bad thing was that we never ended up delivering half of what we wanted because the strategy would change, the direction would change. We have had a stable direction for the last 7 years. We set up a strategic plan 7 years ago, reviewed it after 3 years and modified it. And now we just reviewed it again. And it has made a major difference. We have delivered quite a bit of what we had set out to do, and it's actually very good and stable. Our strategy has a horizon of 3 to 5 years with a line of sight to 10, 25, and even 50. However, strategies really are good for 3 to 5 because today, we don't know what is it that we don't know in 10 years. So it is unlikely that after 3 to 5 years, that strategy still will be vibrant. That strategy will have to be relooked. So we had a session, the board got together and invited some key stakeholders. We invited a few of previous board members, people that were part of the reframing of the board from tactical to strategic. We had a facilitator. We have Fernando Rosario as a facilitator, and he has been with us for at least 20 years, so he knows the history of SHPE as well as the board. And we came up with this new strategy, which we are sharing tonight. And the strategy is done in plain English, very simple. It is done in a way that is easy to share and can be seen and read in a short time and easily understood. That, however, is just skimming the surface, because the next step, and Chris will cover this, so I don't want to talk too much about this, but the next step is the CEO now needs to put meat behind that. We need to come up with the deliverables. We need to come up with a roadmap on how we're going to deliver this. And then a deliverables and scorecard that allows us to know if we're on track every 6 months, every year, every 18 months. That is work that already started. He'll cover that. And this is why you see the strategy looks very simple. It's like, oh my God, is that it? Well, that is a lot. That strategy, is at 3 to 5 years, and I think it's going to go all of 5 years because it's quite a bit. So I'm going to turn it over to Chris now to go through the work, and I'll stay here in case there are questions or anything from the board. But this is a very exciting. Personally, it's a very exciting time. We did 6 years with a consistent strategy. Evolved once, it's evolving now because it is actually our strategy today is consistent with the previous strategy. No sudden moves, no 180s, no 90 degrees, just on track to continue to grow the organization. I'm very excited that we're sharing that with you guys tonight. So, Chris, it's all yours. And if you got any questions, put them on the chat, and we'll deal with them as we go along. There's also a Q&A session where you can put open questions in there too.
All right. Well, thank you, Miguel. And yes, I ditto and echo everything Miguel just said around the plan. It's an exciting time for SHIP, and it's a very bright future ahead, and I'm really just super excited to share some of the information with you. I did want to hit a couple of the bullets here on this slide before I advance that Miguel talked a little bit about. The second bullet where it talks about it, the strategic plan being a single page, and kind of that third bullet, best practices post-COVID. So one of the things that Fernando and I did before we went into the strategy sessions with the board was we kind of looked at what some of the best practices were in industry for nonprofits and for associations coming out of post-COVID when it comes to strategic planning. And one of the big things that stood out was the best practice of the one-page strategic plan that remained very flexible. It was clear and easy to digest and easy to communicate. And one of the main reasons for that is, this is not going to be a shock when I say it, but it has to do with the environment that we're in. And setting 4, 5, 7-year strategic plans that have lots and lots of depth and deliverables in them. The reality is the environment's changing, and it's continuing to change in response to COVID as we settle into whatever this new normal is going to be moving forward. So what we learned was put out a 3 to 5 year strategic plan, keep it one page, keep it clear and concise and easy to digest. And then the operational plan, focus that on a 12 to 18 month time period with the measurables, expecting those measures to change and evolve with the environment. But hopefully the idea is that they evolve within the parameters of what's defined in our current plan. So with that, let's dive into the plan a little bit. And you'll notice that as you have an opportunity to review it, it's divided into kind of 3 main sections. The first section being stay the course, meaning our organization's been around for almost 50 years now. And the fact is, we've got a lot of things that we have historically and continue to do very, very well. They're pillars of the organization, and they're activities and items that we're known for. And so this whole first section is kind of about protecting that, continuing to grow it, and recognize that there are some key pillars and activities in the organization that we want to continue and that have been there for many, many years. The second section, as we get into that, and we're going to get into each of these a little bit deeper here in a minute, but the second section is all about growth to prosper, meaning that the environment continues to change. And if we're going to remain relevant as an organization, we're going to have to remain flexible and grow with that environment. That's where a lot of the innovation and any types of new activities and programs or member benefits, governing models, etc., would all come into play, is recognizing that if we sit static, we essentially are kind of digressing over time. And the fact is, we've got to remain relevant and find the happy balance between growth and innovation, and staying the course with things that have been very stable in the organization for many years and our pillars to our success. And then the third and the final bucket is about established prestige and respect within STEM. And some of you may be asking, wait a minute, we're almost 50 years old. If you look at a number of our sister organizations, we are essentially, Miguel likes to refer to us as the 1-ton gorilla in the Hispanic and STEM space. We've got the largest number of members, etc. And what do you mean establish? And that's all very true. There are many parts of our ecosystem that we are very, very established in, but there are also areas in our ecosystem that we're not established at all. And in many cases, believe it or not, people still don't know who we are. We don't have a reputation of being at the table. And for example, if they need, an expert or want some representation of Hispanics in STEM at the table, we are not the organization that comes to mind. And particularly in this area, we see that in Capitol Hill when it comes to policy. education, advocacy, etc. But there's some other areas as well that we touch on in this third section that is about further enhancing our current profile publicly and establishing that respect in areas that we may not currently be recognized. So the next 3 slides, we're going to kind of dive in and review the 3 objectives for each of the 3 parts. So each part has 3 bullets on each slide. And when we talk about staying the course, we talk about things such as developing and fostering our membership. We've done this historically. We've grown up to 13,000. We flatlined and stabilized at 13,000 through COVID. And coming into this year, post-COVID, we're picking right back up with the growth trajectories that we had pre-COVID. So I would expect our membership to fall somewhere, hopefully 13,500 to 15,000 this year, with showing a little bit of growth post-COVID. And we'll continue to do what we're doing. I want to set the trajectory here over the next couple of years, somewhere in that 20 to 25,000 range of members, and really beef this up. And you're gonna see some of this as I go through the presentation of the emphasis on membership and the value proposition for membership. The second piece here, we've worked on this a little bit over the last 12 to 18 months. Most people think of our prospectuses as kind of that standardized catalog, and most of our prospectuses historically have been focused on events. But this last year, we put the first one out that had some year-long programming activities. And as we go into 22-23, we'll continue to fine-tune that and really have a standard offering of programming that's year-long and ongoing, that have sponsorship opportunities defined within them, and more importantly, some scalability options as well as some customization. So when we sit down with a potential sponsor to talk about a program, we have certain elements of that program that are non-negotiable, and they're core elements that have to be there. But then we also have designed the programming where things can be scaled up to a national level, can be scaled within a company, and can also be customized. And so we'll have those types of areas identified as we really move towards having some core programming that's represented in a catalog. And then the last one, again, we've had a solid reputation in the community for years. The rebrand that we did a couple of years back just really put us on the map in some places that we hadn't been, and continuing to build that brand up, continue to build our profile and focus on our reputation, and really all about that degree completion and ultimately launching careers in industry. That's the key, and that's the focus there in that third bullet. So I'll talk a little bit about some of the operational standardization that'll happen, and some of the implementation, and what some of these measures might look like that we're currently working through. Any questions on that first section before I dive in that's popped up anywhere?
No questions in the chat so far.
Okay, perfect. So let's go into the second area here, Grow to Prosper Part 2. It's kind of that second bucket, if you will. And again, this is a lot of innovation. This is where new programming will come from. And we really wanted to emphasize a couple of key areas in this. The first bullet talking about remaining responsive to new scientific, technological, and corporate trends, and develop new offerings accordingly that advance our mission. I think that's really important. When Raquel left about, what's going on, about 7-8 months now, one of the first things Miguel and I did was we kind of dissolved our programming department as it was, and we created and launched a research and innovation area. That has been paid off significantly for us as an organization. The staff that's been brought in to support that has not only hit the ground running with securing new funding streams for us, but they've also really brought an academic lens to the table that we didn't fully have on staff before. And they are really creating and writing proposals for programming that are grounded in scientific data and current trends. We're also leveraging our industry partnership council's voice and inputs to really identify what industry needs and what's trending in industry to help shape the innovation and the programming that we're doing. I mentioned that's paid off. That's resulted in over 7 figures of new funding in the last 6 months to the organization, with a significant pipeline detailed out over the next 12 to 18 months, far beyond that. So lots going on in that particular area. And I think we will continue to build this bullet out significantly in the next 12 to 18 months. Number 2 is kind of a carryover from the last strategic plan that Miguel mentioned. Continue to diversify revenue streams and expand funding portfolio, right? It's something the organization's been working on since I came on almost 5 years ago. We've had a lot of movement in this area. When I came on, National Convention was the #1 moneymaker, followed directly by the Industry Partnership Council. And those 2 things really drove the year-long activities of the organization and helped fund the organization and the staffing, et cetera. I'm very happy to say we've significantly reduced our reliance on National Convention. And we continue to focus on new revenue streams, such as some of what I mentioned coming out of that first bullet and the research and innovation area. So that's definitely something we want to continue to focus on, but we've had a lot of great movement as well over the last 3 to 5 years in diversifying our revenue. And what that really means long-term is something like COVID. When that comes around, the more diverse our revenue streams are, the more likely we are to be able to sustain, something unforeseen such as COVID and survive as an organization without taking a major hit. It's something to be very proud of. Yeah, if you want to jump in, Miguel.
Yeah, let me just add for historical perspective. When I joined SHPE like 150 years ago, 1998, something like that, the IPC was 80% of our budget. So there was quite a bit of discussion at the time. I remember I wasn't in the board. I was actually at the IPC. There's quite a bit of discussion that the IPC was controlling SHPE. It wasn't, but the perception was that because it was 80% of the budget, and the IPC could withhold money, and then SHPE goes belly up. Today, the IPC is barely 30% of the budget, maybe 35, maybe 25, something like that, and continues to go down, even though the IPC has grown. So the IPC contributes more money than it contributed 20 years ago, yet is a very, very small percentage of what it used to be. And that allows us to be really, really independent. We're not at the mercy of the industry or one event or whatever. We like Chris says, if life changes and things go crazy, we don't rely on just one source of fund. And that gives us strength and stability. Back to you.
Absolutely. I thought you were going to talk about how we survived COVID very briefly. So I'll pick up on that one real quick because it all feeds into the second bullet here. We did flatline in COVID. We made some proactive adjustments when COVID first hit, and we stayed within those. I'm very proud to be able to say that we were able to keep all of our staff on. We had no layoffs. We had no furloughs. From a budget perspective, we actually not only met budget, but exceeded our budget expectations during COVID. And then moving forward, came right out of COVID and put forth the largest budget in the organization's history for this fiscal year. Halfway through the fiscal year, we are on track to meet that budget. So financially, we're extremely solid. And I really that speaks to the second bullet and the importance of it. I've got a question.
Since you brought it up, we're the only organization that grew during COVID. Everybody else was flat or decreased. In fact, some of them decreased and they're now in coma. And we actually grew. That is an amazing testament to the mission of what we have and the reasons why we exist. And I'll go back to mute.
No, you're good, Miguel. Indira, I saw your question here about the APC include the APC on the strategy. And yes, I see Kimberly's chiming in to answer that a little bit. But I'll echo her point for those of you that may not have seen the comment here. The APC is the Academic Partnership Council. We kind of launched this as COVID hit, not knowing we were going to experience COVID. We had a significant number, I want to say 70, 80 academic higher education institutions that signed up to participate in APC. And then this year we implemented a small fee structure to help that going. And we're on, yeah, Kimberly's answering here in the chat, approaching 50 who have joined. The APC is really unique with regards to the mission and their participation, because the APC represents deans specifically, and is you know, a group of 50 plus deans from across the country that help guide us, help inform us. We're beginning to talk partnerships with various institutions that are represented on the APC. We're partnering with some of them to submit NSF grants as subcontractors, and supporting research and programming that their professors and faculty are putting together and creating. So there's a number of ways that the APC will feed in, and particularly feed into this part two, because a lot of times that scientific data is for a result of the research from academia. And so all of that feeds in and supports and justifies why innovation could be shaping up a certain way within our programming and within the organization. So hopefully that helps a little bit, Indira, on answering that. And then the third area, establish prestige and respect within STEM. And as I mentioned, we've got a lot of respect in a lot of areas in our ecosystem, but there are some that we are not as known. Capitol Hill being one of them, and really trying to establish a reputation on Capitol Hill as a leading organization for Hispanics in STEM. You know, there are others out there. There are others already at the table. One of the things that we're learning very quickly in the first 30 to 45 days of really beginning to explore this first bullet in Capitol Hill is there is a lot of support for Hispanics when it comes to policy in Capitol Hill. There's a lot of support and representation for STEM within Capitol Hill. There's not a lot of voice for Hispanics in STEM. And really trying to identify where that overlap is and how to be at the table in both of these very established conversations, but represent Hispanics in STEM holistically is an area that we're trying to figure out where that niche is and how to really establish ourselves at the table, representing both Hispanics and STEM at the same time. And I can tell you, and you know, basically the first 60 days of this, there's not a lot of organizations or voice at the table for both. It tends to be more one or the other. So there's a huge opportunity there to fill that gap and be that voice. Attaining professional and educational recognition of SHPE as a predominant brand and an authentic voice of Hispanics in the STEM ecosystem. Again, I kind of referenced the rebrand back in 2000, I think that was 19, so 2 to 3 years ago. You know, we did a great job with it. We launched it, had great success. It kind of plateaued a little bit during COVID, and I think you'll see in the next 12 to 18 months, well, I know you'll see kind of a revitalization, if you will, of that brand, and really trying to ensure we've got an authentic voice and a predominant brand, and just kind of taking what we launched and taking it to the next level. And I'll talk a little bit about some of those activities here in a couple of upcoming slides. And then the last one here is really beginning to position us as a go-to advocate, as an expert through our membership. And most importantly, I think the key role that we can play with regards to this third bullet is being known and recognized and a household brand of being an organizer of the Hispanic STEM community. And that really means bringing us to the table and putting our membership front and center when an expert is needed for testimony, et cetera, us being able to reach into our professional members and put them front and center. So that's a huge opportunity that we have there, and we'll be able to tackle that. I'm looking at the chat here. I just saw a question pop up. How do we compare or align with Alpha? And I know there is some crossover. Yep. So I've actually got a list of probably 18 to 20 organizations. Alpha's on it, to where I've started sitting down with the CEOs and understanding the landscape that they exist in, and looking for where the overlap is, where the gaps are, and really beginning to identify who partners can be, particularly with this Capitol Hill initiative. A lot of the organizations are well defined when it comes to their policy agendas and what they're doing, or where they're choosing to be silent on Capitol Hill. And so with this being a new area for SHPE, we're definitely not only exploring Congress and Capitol Hill, and kind of that policy landscape, but also the community landscape. So I have had meetings with Unidas US. I sit on the board with HACER. We've got representation with LULAC, and a number of other organizations, where we're exploring the landscape and we're beginning to learn what that looks like. Alpha is on the list. I have not gotten to them yet, but they are on the list for the next probably 45 to 60 days, as we try to butt those meetings up against our RLDC season. But my goal is to get through the list through the springtime. And as we go into 22-23, not only have a much better understanding of the defined landscape and where the gaps are, but also have a pretty good idea of where we need to be plugged in. And I'll be able to really speak to more specifics at that point as we get through some of the rest of these introductory meetings. All right, operational plans and execution. So you'll see as we go into a couple of these transition slides, if we got a question ahead of time from somebody that was submitted, we plugged it in to let you know. We'll kind of be talking about this specific question in this next set of slides here. Of course, with this one, it does talk about and asking, is there a longer version of the strategic plan available? The answer is no. And I think we kind of talked a little bit about why we went with the one page, why we kind of took the approach we did. But the how is really the operational plan and the execution of that. So that we'll talk to those areas as we get into these next couple of slides here. So with regards to the operational plan and the development of that and where we're at, as I mentioned, and Miguel kind of reinforced, we're looking at it kind of the first 12 to 15 months moving forward. So basically Q4 of the current fiscal year, which is April through June, and then all of fiscal year 22-23, which will start July 1 and carry us into June of 23. We brought Fernando back in to meet with the senior management team back in January. And we did a working session that took the strategic plan that you guys just saw and were presented, and we dove into it from an evaluation lens and an operational lens. What were key measures and ideas that we should be focused on, looking at the landscape and really diving into where we could have a significant impact in the next 12 to 15 months and how we would evaluate that. So Fernando currently is working on consolidating all that data for us, and he'll get that back to us here in the next week or next couple of weeks here into early March. And we'll reconvene with the management team to fine tune those summaries, look at his recommendations off the notes, since he facilitated the strategic plan with the board and also did the facilitation the first round with the senior management. And from there, we'll start really defining the evaluation matrix and putting together what that scorecard could look like. I'll send that over to the board electronically for any comment, and we'll finalize it, and then we'll begin to socialize operational plans and measurements, not only with the board, but the intent would be to have some type of a scorecard that when we do the national meeting at convention, hopefully we're able to get in the cycle of doing a couple of these town halls a year with all the membership. But when I meet with regional ops and regional leadership teams, et cetera, being able to refer to standardized matrix and scorecard that are really speaking to the overall plan that you just heard. So that's kind of where that development is. And the intent would be that all of those measures are fully in place going going into 22-23 for a solid 12-month period. A lot of the activity that's going to happen in Q4 may not necessarily be spelled out in those evaluations, but I've got insight in the upcoming slides here of some of the key deliverables and initiatives that we'll be tackling over the next 3 to 4 months. And speaking of some of those current deliverables, so we have signed or are in the process of signing. We've completed negotiations to get a refresh to the current website, focused on membership engagement, focused on interactive user experience, streamlining some of the things that need to be streamlined in the current website. There's some functionality that we had hoped the new website a couple of years back when we launched it would have that things didn't go quite the way we had hoped they would. And then there's a lot that's happened. You know, the research and innovation team has been stood up. We want to put an emphasis on growing engagement with members in general and having more interaction and transparency through the website, and really again, taking the brand and just building on that and making it even more dynamic. So the idea here is that this will be completed sometime at the very end of this fiscal year, or be in testing at minimum and launch in July to August of 22. So definitely well in advance of convention this fall, and hopefully sometime right around NELA we'll be finalizing the refresh of the website and launching that. With that, we'll be looking at things like the corporate PowerPoint template that we use when we do external presentations, et cetera, giving that a new fresh look. And then looking at things with regards to member engagement. This is a huge area of opportunity for us. If we're serious about going from 13,000 to 25,000 members, we've got to engage the members more than what we are on a consistent basis. So some of the things we're starting to explore and look at for 22-23 are things like regular town halls, possibly quarterly or at minimum 1 or 2 a year, plus the national meeting at convention. Some of those may be with me as the CEO, but they could also be with some of our senior leadership, and just having those regular touch points throughout the year. We're exploring launching a podcast where I may be serving as the host, as the CEO, an opportunity to sit down with members to tell their stories, really highlight successes within the membership. But we may also, leverage that podcast to do some interviews from industry and on topics that are of interest to the members, and really give another way and another vehicle to engage with industry and hear from industry of what's going on. We've done some newsletter essays in the past. We'll probably continue some of those, but we really want to get a little more interactive than just doing written essays through the newsletter. Town halls, I mentioned those. There's also a number of our members who host podcasts. I've been invited, and I think some of our other staff have participated in those. So again, anything that we can do to kind of enhance that member engagement, those are the types of things you're going to be seeing out of us as it relates to implementing and really keying up some initiatives for the next 12 to 15 months. Explainer videos is another way to do that. And those are just the really short animated videos that, speak to a particular topic. So for example, how to become a member of SHPE. There, we might have a 60-second animated video on how to do that, or something like that. Miguel, let's see some chat here. Let me catch up. Question.
So there is a question in the Q&A that is not related to this, so I just share it with everybody else. But whenever you have time, the question is, what has been the greatest challenge you've noticed so far as you transition into the CEO role, both for yourself personally and for SHPE for the long term?
Yeah.
So
okay.
I handle that now. I handle that at the end. But
yeah. I'll table it and keep the flow going here, and then we'll circle back to that one. That's absolutely, we can do that.
Okay. And the person, the person who did this, who's anonymous, says, alternate questions: what is the greatest threat to our strategic plan efforts that you foresee? Which I think is a great question, by the way.
Yeah, not a problem. So I'll tackle that one here in a minute, and then we'll save the kind of the more CEO transition conversation for the end. So a couple of deliverables in the works so that are very important. I think these lay a lot of foundation for successful execution and implementation of the strategy that was presented, earlier. First and foremost, case for support. When we talk to our donors, particularly if we're going to try and build up individual donors and get a true cultural philanthropy going, and why donors, individuals should give to SHPE, we need a solid case for support. In other words, we need to be able to answer that why. And I think that's a key piece for us to be able to focus on and have that tangible item where any of our members who are out there talking as a chapter, if you're trying to raise money, why SHPE, what is it about SHPE that makes us different? This would be able to support that, and it should be a final brochure. I've got the end of February here. I think that's going to carry over a little bit into March, but we're very close. Most of the content has been approved and we're in graphic layout, so that one is coming sooner versus later for sure. As we break into that third initiative and we really start focusing on Capitol Hill, we have to have a policy agenda. And a policy agenda does a couple of things for us. It not only spells out key things that we are focused on and interested in supporting, but it also sets parameters around things that we're not going to touch, and helps manage those expectations. So as we dive into this landscape and begin to figure it out and set some of our initiatives, the policy agenda will come. And it's not going to be, if you go to, I'm going to say Unidas US because I've met with them and I've seen their stuff. I think their policy agenda is 50 pages, but they've been doing this for years and they are very, very well established on Capitol Hill. Our policy agenda is going to be 5, 10, 12 pages. And it's going to have 2, 3, 4 key initiatives, and that's the starting place. And over the years, we will probably begin to grow, and that will expand. But for now, we're going to keep it very simple. Indira, you're asking who Unidas US is. I've met with them a couple of times, and there you go, Miguel. Thank you. Great organization, lots to offer, but again, they're very, very established and have been for years in this space. I can say things to expect as we get into Capitol Hill. We'll be tackling non-controversial topics. We will be seeking bipartisan topics. And those are kind of two things Miguel and I have talked about and the board's talked about, as those are kind of go, no-go criteria for us. We don't want to, at this point, it's all about establishing ourselves and building a reputation and letting people know who we are. So we're not going to go in tackling anything that's extremely controversial. And we're definitely going to be looking for things that are bipartisan and should be kind of a no-brainer in today's economy. So think things like broadband for all, HSI funding and increased HSI funding, anything that would support college completion, degree completion, those types of things. Will be the types of stuff we'll be really looking to explore, particularly early on, and then from there we'll allow it to grow and expand. And then updating just all of our current brochures that are out there, making sure they've got the new look and feel, and are fully refreshed as we work through the website and some of that. Annual report content is drafted, and that one will be coming out here probably in the next 60 days or so, from fiscal year 2020 to 2021. All our financials were finalized and put up on the website at the end of the calendar year. And so we're in the processes of finalizing that annual report, and I'll have it out soon.
Chris, you did receive a question in the chat
Yes.
from Daniel. He says, you mentioned the planned growth to 25,000 members. What do you anticipate that split looks like for student and professional members?
Great question, Daniel. So currently, and for the 5 years I've been here, so at least for that long, the membership's about 80-20. 80% students, 20% professionals. And I don't think it's a shock for many of us. We lose a lot of our members as they transition and graduate and launch their careers. We don't retain them as professionals. So we'll get into a couple of questions here about professionals in the next few slides. But that retention is huge for us. And if we can begin to close that gap and retain some of the students into professionals, we will absolutely see a shift there. So do I think it'll go 50-50? Probably not in the next 2 to 3 years. But if we can figure out how to close that gap and retain our students, then the number and the needle will definitely move towards the 50-50. And over time, you would think that the professional area would just eventually supersede the students. With that said, if you look on any given year at undergraduate engineering degrees alone, there's about 80,000 students, Hispanic students pursuing engineering degrees. So to think that we've got 13,000 students or 13,000 members and about 80% of those are students, there's a lot of growth in the college area as well. So, at the end of the day, I would like to see some retention. I would love to see the professional area grow, which means we're going to have to up that value proposition for the professionals. But I think we've got a lot of opportunity within our current student chapters for growth on the current campuses that we're at and continue to expand our reach within the college age as well. So hopefully that answers your question a little bit. Any indication on why we lose them when they become professionals? We don't have any hard data on it. We've got a lot of speculation on things. Most of it does have to do with the value proposition for members. And again, I'll talk to that one here in just a little bit on that, because we did get a couple of questions particularly on that topic as well. All right. So, and speaking of, we're going to dive right into that. I thought I had one more slide, but I don't. A SHPE member needs assessment. So hopefully you guys are well aware that we did a comprehensive needs assessment. This is the first time that's been done since I've been on board. So at least in the last 5 years. We launched that back around convention. We closed it here at February 1. And so in the next few slides, I'm going to illustrate not only kind of the results of that with the sense of response rate. We're going into the analysis now of the data, but also how we anticipate using that data to support the strategic plan that we're talking about tonight. And as you can see, based off the questions here on the slide, we've got a couple of questions that fit into this area as well that I'm going to touch on. So the first question that came in was, for professionals within a STEM career, what is SHPE doing to improve that professional development future? What's the value proposition that for those members that they experience with regards to professional development? And the second question had to do specifically with SHPE ever putting an emphasis on members who want to become professional engineers, and how we could support that, and if we plan to support that or not, and if so, how and why. So I'll touch on those as we go through the next few slides here. With regards to the member needs assessment, we kind of launched that back right before Christmas, put a response, our collection time period up through February 1st of 22. We had a target goal of 4,000 member responses. And when we closed in February, we had a total of 4,414 responses. And so where we're at in the process is really taking that data now and diving into it and conducting the analysis on it. And we'll give a couple of examples of how we can use this data. It was a comprehensive needs assessment. The membership type breakdown, roughly looking at the raw data at a quick glance, we had about 55% of respondents were undergraduate, 31 professionals, 11% graduate, and 3% that were professionals also in graduate school doing both. Gender breakdown was 45-54. I'm missing a number there, so I've got a rounding in that. I don't know if it was closer to 46 or 55, but either way, somewhere right in there. And then we've got 1% in our non-binary third gender and less than 1% identifying as transgender. So kind of put your rounding in there, and it all comes out to right at the 100%. But what I really want to hone in on this is the male female. That is a better representation of achieving a 50-50 split between male and female than we have in our overall membership composition as a whole. So very, very proud of those responses that we got and that gender breakdown there. Very happy with the member type responses as well. Thinking that, if you look at 13,000 members and roughly 10 to 11,000 of those are college students and the rest are professionals, 31% of those 4,400 being professionals. That's a huge sample size for our professionals, which means we should have some great data coming out of that group. Ways we can use this, and I've got a couple of examples here that illustrate data-driven concepts that could result in innovation and kind of supporting that second area of the strategic plan. We had a question here about member perks specifically and what would be important to the individual answering the question. We have raw data here from the undergraduate sample and the professional sample. And what's really cool about it is if you look at the top 3 things that ended up being ranked, they're ranked differently between the undergraduates and the professionals, but they were the same 3 things. Certification discounts, professional advisor services, and airline discounts would all be member perks that would be a very high value out of the sample size. And similarly, if you drop down into what ended up kind of being 4, 5, and 6, again, ranked slightly different depending on whether you're looking at the undergraduate or the graduate or the professional sample. The same 3 things were in that 4, 5, and 6 slot. It had to do with dual memberships, particularly with disciplinary associations, hotel discounts, and graduate school application financial assistance. So as you can see, some of these data points are very low-hanging fruit in ways that we could very quickly and pretty easily increase our membership value proposition. Some of these I'll take a little bit of alignment and some work, but this is an example of how we can leverage answering and further defining membership value proposition of being a member with SHPE and ensuring that it's a data-driven enhancement that we're adding to what we currently offer based on what our membership's telling us. A way that this could play out is since this data came in, and over the last 3 weeks, we've had some exploratory conversation. Nick Temstini is a board member. He's also an employee at Accenture. He saw some of this data presented at the February board meeting, said, let me make a phone call to Google. I've got an idea. He brought us, Accenture and Google all to the table. And we're exploring right now how to bring an associate cloud engineer certification to our membership through an 8-week learning journey, content being free of charge and a discounted fee for the sitting of the certification for the testing. Accenture bringing mentoring and coaching to the table and potentially launching this as early as summer of 2022 in alignment with being able to complete the coursework, test, and certify before convention, going into the November convention and career fair, and being able to, for the participants to be able to have that associate cloud engineer certification added to their resume as they go into the career fair at convention. This is all a direct result of the previous 2 slides. And that being presented at a board meeting and a board member taking the initiative to open a couple of doors and get the right people at the table and say, hey, how can we make this work? So it's a data-driven result. It's a industry-driven need that's in response to that. It's in alignment with what the members are saying with regards to certification discounts. So there's just a number of ways here that we're taking data, both qualitative and quantitative, from members and industry, et cetera, pulling it all together and being able to potentially bring a solution and a new offering to the membership and enhance membership value proposition. So that's just an example. Daniel, you got a question here. Was executive coaching or mentoring not included in those perks for professionals by any chance? No, membership mentorship as it currently is offers mentoring for professionals. And I think there's a way to definitely, as we look at programs like this, and others to continue to fold mentoring in and help our professionals understand that if they're pursuing a certification, then they, are the mentee, but there's also the role for the professionals to serve as the mentor if they've been successful and are later in their career, and have this experience online. So there's a number of ways to fold those in, and that's something we're always looking at. Another example with regards to kind of strategic relevancy and remaining relevant in post-COVID, these are more qualitative data drivers that we've heard over the last 12 to 18 months. Continuing to revisit that membership engagement opportunity and add that additional value proposition, looking at the post-COVID environment and recognizing that we historically have been an in-person organization. COVID forced us to go 100% virtual. And in the post-COVID environment, what's the balance here, right? And where we need representation of both, and what could that look like? Post-COVID, Miguel mentioned a lot of organizations took major hits during COVID. The fact that we flatlined and survived it very positively, that's great. But in the post-COVID environment, how are we going to remain relevant? How are we going to keep that competitive edge? And what are we going to continue to do in the areas of innovation to really keep us at the forefront in our ecosystem? And our IPC voice and that industry voice has had a couple of strong requests as well. They've really talked a lot about discipline-specific career fairs and how could that look and what could that look like. And they also want to see an increased professional engagement and representation at career fairs. So things like advanced degree career fairs or career fairs specifically for mid-career professionals. Things like that are growing voices from industry that they're requesting of us as an organization. So a concept coming out of some of that qualitative data that we're beginning to explore and will butt up against the analysis coming out of the needs assessment are things such as, should we consider doing some virtual discipline or industry specific summits, possibly a 2-day type concept with a day of content and professional development material, and a half day or a full day of career fair on day 2. Again, what that might shape into, what that could turn into, it's all up in the air. We're starting to explore this. There's an opportunity here to potentially partner with discipline associations and offer some type of dual membership, but also leverage those discipline associations to bring relevant content to that day 1. Looking at things of having 1 to 2 title sponsors and for each summit, where, if we're doing a tech summit, really focusing to a Google or a Facebook, for example, to be the lead sponsor for that summit. And then of course, having the career fair all focused on tech and tech opportunities would be an example of what that could look like. For our members, it's targeted education and job opportunities as an ROI. For industry, it really meets the need that they're asking for of having some type of discipline or industry specific targeted recruitment. And of course, the major ROI for them is the number of hires that they get from our members. Targeted impact here is huge. We're looking at potentially 700 per summit with a goal to sell each of those out, quote unquote, max out capacity of the platform. And if you implement 7 virtual summits as described here, we're touching somewhere in the tune just shy of 5,000 people. And that's huge. Our RLDCs combined don't come close to serving that many people. So this is just an example of how we could hit more members, put more opportunity in front of them, package some things a little bit differently, potentially partner with some new partners and some associations, and really hone in on some of the needs assessment data that could come out that people are asking for. We kind of pitched this idea earlier in the week at the IPC meeting. Their feedback was, hey, great idea, like it, definitely want to see one for mid-career, and definitely would love to see something around advanced degrees and having an entire summit dedicated to advanced degrees. So if I've got any of my NGC on the call or my graduate students, I know this is near and dear to y'all's hearts. It's a large voice that you bring to the table, and industry sitting here saying, yes, we need to see this as well. And I think that's a great way to meet some needs and from both industry and our members. So again, still in concept, still ideas, but these are the types of things we're exploring for 22-23. All right, last section here has to do with some staff capacity, structure, and reporting. I want to give a couple of updates here and on some minor shifts within the organization, just with how the staff is structured. And in January, I started a small restructure that spanned about 20, 30 days, and we kind of wrapped it up here in mid-February. But we've regrouped the organization into 4 main offices or departments, if you will. The first one being an administration office. Rhonda, who has been on staff as our controller for basically the last year or so, has been promoted into the chief administration officer role, which is a new role within the organization. And we consolidated all of our finance, contracting and sourcing, facilities, IT and HR all into an administration office specifically that she will lead. As far as your normal points of contact, so Josue, for example, for IT, Rhonda and Alma and her staff for finance, Sarah for any contracting type things. All those people remain the same. So, and that goes across all 4 of these new offices. It just really has to do with kind of the senior positions and the ultimate reporting structure into the organization. The Research and Innovation Office, we talked about that early on. That was a restructure we did right after Raquel left that has really hit the ground running. There's no significant changes here in that structure or focus. It's just keep doing what we've been doing and keep adding to it and growing. Kimberly was promoted into the Chief Research and Innovation Officer role. And then Esther is kind of the main number 2 in that division, that office, and it just continues to grow. A lot of new staff in the organization are in this area because of the diversification of funding that we're bringing in. A lot of that funding is restricted funding, meaning that it has to be spent a certain way. And a lot of that has to do with the programming and the innovation that's going on in this area. And we're writing staff into those proposals to cover those expenses and those growths as well. So it's not just continuing to add generic overhead of unrestricted dollars. We're bringing the dollars in not only for the program, but for the staff to support it in that area. External relations, this is a consolidation of a couple of areas. Everyone's very familiar with our corporate partners, our industry partnership council, a lot of our external funding and how that works. So that is all here. As we stand government relations up right now, I'll be a lot of the face in leading that initiative, but as it gets established, we anticipate that we will need at least one body to really manage government relations, and that will fall into this external relations office. Our marketing and communications is currently kind of split between supporting our corporate funders and stakeholders, and then a lot of the overall organizational branding and stuff between myself and the external relations office. But again, over time, as things continue to grow and stabilize here, this will all move into the external relations office. And then our career fair, as you all know, there's such a link between our corporate partners and our career fair that will stay in the external relations office. And I'm very happy to announce on this one, Monique Herrera was promoted into the Chief External Relations Officer role and will be spearheading this 3rd bucket. And then the 4th and final bucket has to do with, this is probably one that our members are going to be most excited and interested in. It's an engagement office, and we currently are interviewing for a chief engagement officer who will be spearheading and leading up all of our signature events department, which think of our convention, our RLDCs, and NELA. You guys know Nicole is the face and the leader of that particular area. She remains in that role, and her team do an amazing job, and they'll feed into this engagement office. And then all the other bullets listed here: membership, member engagement, operations, individual philanthropy, corporate or chapter operations and governance, and local community engagement and outreach. All of those types of things are things that our membership have been asking for more and more support. Our chapter leaders request it every year. They want to see more standardization across the board. They want more support in how to be successful as chapters. Our regional leadership teams ask for more support and more resources to be able to support our chapters with. And we're going to finally step up and answer the mail here. So between now and August of this year, we'll be adding 3 new dedicated staff specifically to membership and engagement and chapter operations. And then of course the Chief Engagement Office is the leader of that. So that's kind of a 4th body, if you will. But particularly with membership and chapter operations, everybody I think knows Brianna and Alexis, and they've been your go-to for the past 3 to 4 years. And their team will be doubling from 2 to 5 by August of this calendar year. So again, I think that's a huge piece. We've heard you, and it's past time to respond in that area.
And I will add that this is a great example on how SHPE has grown and continues to grow and continues to expand. Our structure remains the same, but modifies itself to be able to pick up the challenges and the extra work that comes from being a 15,000 member organization instead of a 3,000 member organization, planning to be a 25,000 member organization. So the structures need to be agile enough to modify themselves to go. And Chris has done a fabulous job creating this structure that will not only meet our needs from here to 25,000, but will meet our needs from here to 50,000. So this is a great example on how we need to continuously evolve to meet the needs of SHPE. And I'll go back on mute.
Thanks, Miguel. I'm not going to go through this slide. I just kind of talked through a lot of it on the previous slide, but when we send this out or the video goes live, I wanted everybody to have a little bit kind of an expanded view, if you will, into what the engagement office responsibilities and areas will look like. So this is just a further breakdown of some of that, and particularly the areas in the top 4 quadrants where the staff will be really focused on building up that capacity and being able to respond to member needs as well as chapter needs and local community engagement activities that our chapters are so amazing at delivering, and we're really just trying to build that support up. Let's see here. Anonymous asked one, how will these proposed summits relate or perhaps make obsolete our current RLDCs? You know, I don't have an answer for that one at this point. That we're back a couple of slides here when we were talking about the virtual summits. I think the answer at this point is really trying to figure out what we have from a virtual component for post-COVID and a programming lens. And right now we don't have a lot we offer at all. And this is a way to explore those summits and say, hey, let's put those out there as virtual events. Let's spread them out a little bit throughout the year and see what happens. With regards to the RLDC model, there are areas of opportunities there. There's lessons learned every year. There are some consistent gaps that I've seen and heard for the last 5 years. And you know, I think we have to continue to look at that, particularly as COVID comes out. I can tell you this year, we're not back to pre-COVID levels in RLDCs. And is that a result of the timing of just where we're at with the latest strand of COVID? Is that in response to overall post-COVID environment? And, you know, is it other things around, you know, people being concerned with travel? I don't know. I don't have an answer to that. But I can tell you, we are not back to post-COVID RLDC responses going into RLDC starting next week. So it's something we're just gonna have to continue to keep an eye on. But in the meantime, the virtual summits give us an opportunity to explore something different, try to answer and be responsive to some needs and some qualitative feedback, and we'll continue to grow and assess as we move through it. And then, you know, here's the organizational structure. It's kind of an eye chart, but I wanted everybody to have it as, again, a post meeting to refer back to. And if there's any questions or anything, please let me know. I've kind of got the open positions that are currently being recruited in orange, and then a couple that we'll look to hire July by the August timeframe that was mentioned here down in the light blue. But again, I think you'll see as members and as chapter leaders and regional leadership teams, your main points of contact have not changed throughout the organization at all. So this should be very familiar as you look at names and who leads are, et cetera. Really just more representing the 4 new offices and that structure. And with that, I think we've kind of answered questions as we went in the chat. So before I circle back to the one kind of asking about the CEO transition, let's make sure we've got any of our content questions answered on the slides for tonight, and then I'll be happy to circle back on that one. So Miguel, Brianne, I know several of you are watching the chat and the Q&A. Is there anything that we have not addressed that we need to?
I don't think so. I know Indira had a question that's maybe for Kimberly and maybe for offline, but have we considered the differences in value of certifications versus micro-credentialing programs?
Yeah, we've looked at it a little bit. I think there's more work to be done there, Indira, and I'm hopeful that as we get some of the professional needs assessment data back as well, that drives some interest. The Google example that we listed here was one that just kind of happened straight out of Accenture and Google, and you know, it was an easy conversation to start, and we know that certification is very valuable, but we also know there's a lot of other certifications out there. You had even the question about the professional engineer licensing and what that could look like, and could that play a role as we move forward, and that being a formal license, understanding, you know, they happen at the state level, but the prep work that we might be able to provide as a national organization to our members could be something to look at from that lens.
So Daniel just asked, do you have a plan to increase lifetime professional membership by any chance? Does that add value to SHPE?
Absolutely, it does. And one of the big places that adds value, Daniel, is those membership dues. A portion of them go back to the designated chapter that the donor identifies when they make the donation or sign up for that lifetime. And I say donation because a lot of what we see, at least over the last couple of years, is people sponsoring other people. So they may not be signing up for their own lifetime membership, but a piece of that goes back to support chapter operations, and then a large piece of that fee goes into an investment account where we support not only key initiatives, but we also support scholarships. So those dues are very important when it comes to value and mission advancement for the organization. And then those members specifically add a lot of value. Those are oftentimes the individuals that are at SHPE, you know, for life, as the lifetime membership would suggest, and you see them advancing throughout their career, and their involvement in SHPE evolves as well, right? So there may be the recipient early on, and then they're getting that education, they're finding the job, and as their careers advance, oftentimes they're the ones that are coming back, and they're leading chapters and professional chapters. They're volunteering and leading committees, and they've been around for a long time, and help keep the heartbeat of the organization alive. So there's that tangible value, but there's also an intangible value that you can't put a price on when it comes to so many of our lifetime members and their involvement in our mission fulfillment as a whole. And we've got a follow-up here. What about a version of honorary fellow membership types? You know, there's a number of ways to look at it, Indira, with regards to honorary or fellow memberships. Corporate memberships is another one that's been tossed around. All of those types of categories or variations to our current membership types require bylaw changes. So we need to really look at that and be thoughtful about what new membership types we might need in the future, but we also need to be very understanding that we don't want to be presenting bylaw changes up, every 12 months or something like that. So it's got to be something that can grow with us and evolve. And that may be definitely something to look at, but there's a number of different ways to create membership categories that have been thrown around over the last 2 to 3 years for sure. Mario, since SHPE's middle name is professional, what value proposition do you have to increase this from the 30% of the membership? It's a balancing act. So I think, you get the needs assessment in, you look at this, the board has been very clear over the last few years, particularly that the organization's focus should be the 3 to 4 years pre-college and 3 to 4 years post-college. So basically high school through early career is our defined sweet spot and feeds into our strategy. Where the opportunity really lies and where, and as the board has defined that, where I think we have not really, well, we haven't done the best we could. And quite frankly, we haven't done a lot in this area, is looking in that K through 8 space and that mid-career through executive and on into the boardroom, and who in our ecosystem is doing that well, and exploring defined partnerships with them that are not only formal partnerships, but they're publicized partnerships. And that's where I think we will see a big increase, particularly with professionals being able to bring things like a dual membership with professional associations to the table, being able to partner with an organization that has executive training that we don't have to be the expert in, but we have a defined relationship with them and are able to bring that programming to our members and be able to say, this is a strategic partner with SHPE, not only internally behind the scenes, but publicly facing as well. And there's value for both organizations in that. Those are some of the types of partnerships that I think we really need to explore moving forward and will be critical in being successful in this new strategic plan, particularly as it relates to our professionals. But let's not forget, all the data is going to suggest that high school is too late if you're going to really influence students pursuing STEM degrees. And so those partnerships down into K through 8 space are going to be critical. And hopefully they offer volunteer opportunities for our current membership to be able to participate in as well. And then at that point, we're starting to create a member value proposition for all elements of the membership. Mario, let's see here. We have other associations that are focusing on board readiness, but there's a huge gap in the middle management and technical leadership areas. Yes. The more that I look at it, I tend to agree with you, but there are some organizations out there that are doing some great work. And it's really a matter of me being able to sit down with their CEOs and start a conversation and then be able to engage our staff and their staff to really nail down some key strategic partnerships that not only align with our strategic plan, but add that value proposition. So it's going to take a little bit of work. But I think we're going to have some solid data coming out of the needs assessment to point to the need. And then it's a matter of going and identifying the partners and sitting down and saying, here's our need, here's what we specifically need. We think you can fill this gap. What would that look like? And being able to come to an agreement and create a partnership that can be publicly communicated and put out there. All right, Jen, were there any other questions that we missed?
You got them all.
Well, we still
Nope.
need your biggest challenge.
Yeah, biggest challenges. Okay,
Yeah.
so I think there was one about SHPE in general and kind of what the biggest challenge was. I think, to be just completely transparent, the biggest challenge right now in my mind is continuing to successfully navigate this post-COVID environment. And until we see things fully stabilize back out in industry and the academic environments, etc., our biggest challenge in order to remain relevant is being flexible within these upcoming months, year, whatever that ends up looking like, because about every time we think we're starting to stabilize back out and we're going to be back in person 100% or whatever, a new variant's popped up or something else related to COVID has had a nice spike in, and then everybody gets panicked and shuts back down. We still got industry partners that have travel bans in place. I'm experiencing meetings on a weekly basis where something is planned in person and then something happens and it ends up being remote or virtual, or it gets canceled altogether and postponed a couple of months. And that type of volatility in the environment is our biggest challenge and threat in staying relevant throughout all of that, so that we don't take a step backwards. We survived the whole shutdown period of COVID, and we survived it very well, but we're not out of the clear as an organization. And if we don't remain relevant and flexible, we could take a hit that just wasn't foreseen. And I think that's our biggest immediate challenge. Long term, I think our biggest challenge is making sure we've got the right infrastructure in place to truly grow the organization. The board's tasking myself and the staff to grow it. So going from 10 to 13,000 members to being able to manage 20 to 25,000 members is a very different ballgame. And how do you keep the same level of service and the same type of engagement available when your membership is that large? How do you provide programming for the masses and not just a small segment of the membership? How do you continue to have an impactful scholarship program when your membership is 2 to 3 times what it is right now? Those are long-term infrastructure type challenges that if we don't manage them correctly, we could outgrow our infrastructure and then not be able to deliver the type of excellence that not only we've learned to expect out of the Familia, but we kind of demand it of ourselves. So that's probably the biggest challenge long term that I see with the type of growth we're not only expecting, but I'm confident we're going to deliver on. And then on a personal level, as the CEO in the transition, it may seem a little weird, but I think the hardest transition for me has been the number of different topics that I cover in one day, from meeting to meeting to meeting, and having to kind of always be on, but it being a completely different topic. So, as the chief operating officer, I could kind of know and anticipate what the topics were and what my day was going to look like. And mentally, you'd open the day up and look at the calendar and go, okay, I got it. I'm going to be talking membership and these 3 programs today, or whatever. And transitioning into the CEO role, every day is completely different. You open the calendar and you look at it in the morning, and by noon, half the stuff's rearranged and been moved around. And I may talk 10 different topics in a single day, and they're all relevant topics. They're all important topics. They're all stakeholder type meetings or something like that. And just getting accustomed to turning one topic on and the next one, turning one topic off and the next one on is probably been the biggest growth or challenge for me on a personal level. And then, it's something that I talk a lot about with the staff, of being able to maintain the boundaries between the job and your personal life and your family life, and making sure that you're making time for your family. And the CEO role, it doesn't stop. There's always something, there's always a topic. And even if the meetings have stopped for the day, my mind's still going. And learning to really shut that off and make time and make sure that I'm putting the time aside for my family has been a little more of a challenge than what I expected it to be. But we're starting to get our arms around that one, and still dealing with the, hey, let's cover 10 different topics, and them all being great and important, and deep dives in a single day. That'll come, I think, with practice. But those are some of the things I deal with, and growth opportunities for me as we got the transition.
It's a 24/7 job. It's
Yeah,
a 24/7 job.
it is. Let's see, Daniel, you got a question here. don't know this, maybe I should. What's your background in? Yeah, happy to answer that. So my master's is in public health. My doctorate's in human sexuality, believe it or not. Most people kind of go, really? And scratch their head. And then they want to know, how did I end up where I ended up throughout my career? So I got very early career advice to never set a firm line and say, this is what my career is going to be, and to try to be open-minded about that as it evolves. So I started in public health, particularly in HIV and STDs, a lot of substance abuse and mental health as well early in my career. I've been in the nonprofit industry from day one. And as I advanced up in the public health world as a consultant and an executive, there were some opportunities to jump over into education. So I did that. When I made that jump, I ended up more specifically jumping into financial literacy and education. I've worked in the fine arts and consulted in the fine arts. From there, I kind of jumped into workforce development, which is what I've been in for the last 10 to 11 years. The first stretch of that, first 4 to 5 years of that was all in workforce development for individuals with disabilities. And then more recently, 5 years here with SHPE. This is my first association role. My first big jump into STEM, but I've worked with underrepresented, individuals and communities my entire career. I love being learning to be a voice and an advocate, and really listening and diving in. Public health forced me to do that many times because most of the individuals that our missions served and that I was serving were not representative of myself. And so it's been amazing to sit back and learn to listen, and then try to not only position someone else's voice or another community's voice, but really put them front and center along the way, and learn to get out of the way and let them tell their amazing stories. And that in itself is really how mission fulfillment has looked for me for 20 plus years. And so it's been a great career, and I love where I'm at. I've talked many times about the alignment with the values of this organization, and working with our members and hearing their stories and getting to know them. And it's a great opportunity and a very humbling opportunity to lead. So thanks for the
Chris.
question. Yeah, Miguel.
Hey, Chris, Daniel asked you a follow-up question, which I'm going to paraphrase. Okay, this is not what he said. This is my paraphrasing. Are you here for the long run, or are you gonna cut bait and leave as soon as you can?
Yeah, no, great question. And my answer is, I'm here as long as you guys will have me. So I have no intentions of moving on. I love this organization. The alignment with my personal values are huge for me. Daniel here, well said. I appreciate it. I've been told, it'll be a stepping stone, but my answer to every single time I've been told that is I'll believe it when I see it, because the organization is one that I truly have fallen in love with. I'm very much dedicated to the mission. And I think there's tons of growth here for us to do long into past my retirement and keep going. So I'm here again, as long as the organization will have me. So.
Yeah, I just want to add a few words in this. I've worked with Chris for the last 4 or 5 years in different capacities, and when Raquel left, I worked very closely with him. When I was acting CEO, I rely on him quite a bit, and I found his dedication to this organization to be. You guys are going to give me a lot of crap over this, but higher than half of my Hispanic friends. I also see him fighting for Hispanic serving institutions, something that nobody in the Hispanic community outside SHPE or within SHPE is really fighting for. Even the Congressional Caucus is not fighting for this, and he's doing a mission to get us out of the minority classification into being our own things. And I gotta say that I think we're going to have tremendous growth under Chris. I'll be long gone, and he's going to stay, and he's going to do a tremendous job. So I personally think he's doing a great job, and he has a personal dedication to our mission, a true personal dedication, not just this is my job, but a real how can I say it, belief that what we're doing is the right thing to do. Those are my 15 cents, for whatever it's worth. I think this is a good choice.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Miguel. We got one last question. I'm going to say this is going to be our last one because I'm looking at the clock and we're right at the top of the hour for the town hall time that we had dedicated tonight. But Indira, you're going to get the last word here. It says, what initiatives do I personally wish or hope to see implemented? Anything that wasn't already covered tonight or spoken to, and I think I'll go back to the number one thing that I want to see done, and I've got Jen's heard me say it 100 times already in 4 months, is I want to see our brand elevated even more. I want it to represent the membership fully. I want it to be bold. I want it to be authentic. I want our membership front and center with our stories and how we speak to impact and the value of what our membership brings to society. And I want that represented more than anything in our brand, far beyond what it is right now. I think there's a lot of opportunity there, and that's probably the number one thing that I hit the ground running. And it's something I think we need to do as an organization overall. But for me personally, it's probably the most important thing right now is really just elevating the brand one more level and really maximizing the intent of what that rebrand was 3 years ago, and taking it to the next level. So hopefully that answers that. With that, I'm going to throw just a thank you for joining us in the chat tonight for everybody who's here. And I say good evening to all of you, and thank you for joining us. And if you have any questions or any follow-up, just please reach out to the staff, reach out to myself if needed, and just know we're here. We're here for each of you. We're here to serve, and we're here to elevate the community as it should be elevated and as it needs to be elevated. So thanks for joining us, and look forward to the next town hall we have.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.